Christina Tuff with Simpson International News, here with you today to discuss the effects that media can have on its viewers. I'm sure that you will agree with me when I say that the media can be very persuasive and in various different ways, whether it be highlighting all of the new features on the latest iPhone within a short 30-second commercial, illuminating the coolest, latest new toy and why every child needs at least one, or even showing off the latest fashion trends that everyone should be following. But what we sometimes fail to notice is that the media can persuade someone in a much more significant, life-changing way. It can often be difficult to detect how big of an impact the media can actually have on its viewers' attitudes, behavior, and overall well-being. And this persuasion, inadvertently, can even reach to the extent of taking one's life. The impact of media persuasion on its viewers can be amplified or reduced depending on several factors, which can include who provided the information, how this information is being relayed to its spectators, and who the viewers are. All of these factors can play a large role in how the information is processed by its audience, whether centrally, when the viewer takes time to weigh all aspects of the information in an orderly manner, or peripherally, which happens when the viewer accepts the information being covered without careful consideration. Today, we will be primarily discussing the effects that media violence has on its viewers' behavior, taking an even closer look at its relationship with preceding homicides. Past research examining the impact of media violence on aggression has typically been accomplished within the laboratory setting. Most of this research performed in the laboratory has shown that media violence does, in fact, encourage increased aggressive behavior from its viewers. But do these studies provide us with enough evidence that this increase would also happen in the real world, outside of the laboratory? Well, policymakers have been anxious to find out, but more specifically, whether or not there would be an increase in fatalities following the broadcasted violence. Luckily, there has been recent research using real-world statistics in order to study the effects that media violence has on homicides, which we will discuss today. This real-world study has been influenced by previous research centered on investigating the effects of media violence within our nation, which has revealed valuable information regarding the correlation between broadcasted suicides and the number of following suicides. This research has exposed that there is a significant rise in the number of suicides within the United States following broadcasted suicide stories. The more publicity a suicide story gets, the higher the increase of suicides that follow. Suicides are more likely to occur within or near the community that the publicized suicide took place. Fatal single car crashes may also rise following broadcasted suicides. And interestingly, the drivers in these car crashes are often found to have many similarities to the person in the broadcasted suicide story, with age commonly being a resembling factor. These facts clearly demonstrate the persuasiveness that media can have on its audience, whether the influence was intended or not. While it was hoped that research could conclude whether broadcasted homicide stories increased real-world homicides, it was determined that given the high number of broadcasted homicides, it would be extremely challenging to separate which of these broadcasted stories provoked the preceding homicides. Therefore, it was agreed that following the number of homicides after more specific, less frequent broadcasted media violence clips would provide a more accurate analysis. Furthermore, past studies have discovered some specific features often presented within broadcasted violence stories that have been found to trigger increased hostility in the real world, which include when the violence is stimulating, appears authentic, is vindicated, and when the offender was praised preceding the event and was obviously aiming towards hurting his target. Since heavyweight prize fights contain each of these features and are typically less publicized than homicide stories, it was decided that heavyweight prize fights would be the most accommodating type of broadcasted violence to be incorporated within this newly performed research. While the impact that heavyweight prize fights has on hostility has been studied in the laboratory setting in the past, which has shown a connection between watching heavyweight prize fights and increased violent behavior afterwards, The impact that broadcasted prize fights has on the public's aggressiveness in the real world has been of interest. Therefore, this research specifically targets the television showings of heavyweight championship prize fights and the surge of homicides thereafter. Similar to the laboratory study, this research based on real-world statistics has shown a relationship between recently broadcasted heavyweight prize fights and a significant increase in homicides, and with an even more notable increase in homicides after a highly publicized fight. Now, let's check in with Patrick Delaney, who will discuss a more detailed look at its results, as well as the data sources and method used within this study.
Thanks, Christina. Berkowitz and fellow researchers thus began a significant study to find out just how much the subjects were affected by seeing acts of violence, in this case while in a laboratory setting. Now that Christina has given you a thorough introduction to mass media violence and how it relates to homicides, I'm going to go over some of the data behind how the experiment was ran and how it was used to test the hypothesis, as well as the methods of analysis and results of the experiment. This research was based off of an exhaustive list of championship prize fights obtained from the Ring Book Boxing Encyclopedia, which is the standard if one is seeking reference on the topic. The data collected was from 1973 to 1978. It was chosen for analysis because daily counts of all U.S. homicides are publicly available from the National Center for Health Statistics during this time. To begin, we're going to take a look at the methods of analysis used for the experiment by Berkowitz and his colleagues. For this particular study, a standard time series regression analysis was used. For those of us unfamiliar with what exactly time regression analysis is, it is simply a statistical method for predicting a response based on the response history. Time series regression is commonly used for modeling and forecasting statistical data in many different areas. So essentially, it takes all the data from before and makes predictions using the information to see patterns. Dummy variables were used to help categorize the data. These are 0 to 1 variables that help sort it into mutually exclusive categories. Different 0 to 1 dummy variables were assigned to each day of the week, with Monday having one, Tuesday having another, and so forth, with Sunday being the omitted variable. Each month and year was also coded using the same method. Another factor to consider throughout this research was the holidays and other variables that might affect the results of the study. It has been shown that the holidays have illustrated that there is a rise in homicides on public holidays. Because of this, seasonal effects must be corrected before the effects of the prize fights on homicides can fully be studied. Otherwise, the data could potentially become compromised. In addition to the dummy variables for the days, months, and years, with the exception of Sunday, public holidays were also each assigned a dummy variable for this study. These included New Year's, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. A special variable was used to indicate an upcoming championship prize fight. This research sought to test whether viewing the fights, and especially the prize fights, championship prize fights, would have an effect on the homicide rates that subsequently followed. The regression coefficient of the championship prize fights variable gives the effect of a prize fight X amount of days later. At first, the effect of the prize fight is examined for a 10-day period that follows. Later on, a longer period is studied. The results of this study were concrete in their findings. The statistical analysis showed that after the average championship prize fight, homicides rocketed up on the third and fourth day for a total increase of 11.62. This was shown to be statistically significant. The information also showed that the third day displays the largest peak by far in homicides. The most surprising revelation from all of this is that the third day peak isn't just in the previous study, but also is prevalent in many previous ones as well, showing that this peak is not only of concern, but also that it has been before, but the reason remains unknown. And let's not forget about the fourth day peak, which also was there, just not quite as substantial. So a little more information on the third day peak. As previously stated, it did and has occurred in numerous previous studies. The data shows that California auto fatalities peak on the third day after publicized suicide stories. This phenomenon also appears to happen in Detroit as well. It appears that automobiles aren't the only ones though, U.S. non-commercial airplane crashes also have been reported to be higher on the third day following publicized suicide stories. So essentially, when suicide stories are publicized, on TV or whatever else, the third day after that, there's a peak in suicides by plane, by car, a lot of different ways. For whatever reason, there's what seems to be a lag following the events, which offers no explanation as to why 3 days seems to be a reoccurring number in all this. The peak in homicides after the fights cannot be attributed to the day of the week, the month, the year, or the holiday effects, because all these variables were corrected for in the regression analysis. The data also further shows that the increase in homicides aren't random, as they are statistically significant, meaning that it can't be coincidence that all of the information points to the third day. All the previous studies, as well as this one, have shown that there is some significance and some correlation between viewing the prize fights and then the third day and the fourth day after that, there's an increase in homicides. And the same goes for suicides. When those are publicized 3 days later, 4 days later, there's an increase or a spike in suicides as well. Now that we've went over the data, the methods of analysis, as well as the results, we're going to go out to Esther, who's in South Africa, that can give us some possible alternative explanations for the peak in homicides.